President Bongbong Marcos has signed an executive order making the wearing of face masks outdoors optional.
In addition to that, we're happy to announce that we are 6% away from the wall of immunity. That's why we're malakas na ang loob natin for face masks. Now, congruent to that as well, the state of calamity is extended for possibly 3 months. We will transition out of the state of calamity after further review.
Now that wearing of masks outdoors is voluntary, the ball is in the court of local government units. How can LGUs properly implement and make sure that guidelines are not open to different interpretations? We will discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to The Chiefs. Ako po si Roby Alampay. Kasama po natin sa studio, Lingao of One News. And kasama natin, joining us via Zoom, Pamintuan of the Philippine Star. She's in Manila. And Luchi Cruz-Valdes of News 5 joining us from Quezon City. Chiefs, happy Monday.
Hello, happy Monday and welcome back, Roby.
Oy, salamat. Oh, kaya nga, tanong ko, Ami, ano bang balita over the past 2 weeks?
Eh, siyempre, puro tong, well, apart from the death of the Queen na malaking balita dito. Pero yan, yung masking nga, wala na ngayon, outdoors lang naman. And, tandaan nyo, mass transportation, kailangan pa rin.
Tsaka hindi lang
Yung mga bata, mga immunocompromised, mga senior,
Pinakikiusapan lang naman, no?
Tsaka I don't know if I got that right, pero kanina kay Press Secretary Angeles, parang inaano niya na, nabanggit pa yung non-crowded outdoor areas.
Oo, kasi ang crowded areas, for example, Divisoria.
May mga lugar kasi, halimbawa, Divisoria, sobra. Talagang magbubuo na kayo ng mukha ron eh. Kailangan nyo tayo mag-masking.
So may
Pero at
qualifiers
least sa mga beach, like Boracay, dati naka-mask pa mga tao sa beach. Ngayon, pwede na, di ba? Pwede nang mag-selfie nang hindi naka-mask.
Oo nga, pero exactly, those are the kinds of things na actually may mga tanong pa rin, di ba? Para bakit sinabong outdoors, still not good enough. Anyway, that's precisely why we'll speak to our first guest after a quick break. Keep it right here on One News. We'll answer those questions when we come back. It is official, face masks are now voluntary outdoors. But how are local government units preparing for the implementation? Joining us on the phone is Quirino Provincial Governor Dax Cua. He's also the chairperson of the League of Provinces of the Philippines. Governor Cua, welcome to the Chiefs.
Magandang gabi po, Sir Sir Roby, Sir Ed, Ma'am Luchi, Ma'am Ami, sa ibang nalabihis sa lahat ng nanonood po.
Now, sir, napirmahan na yung order, but the DILG did say, I mean, Yusek Margarita Gutierrez in particular said that the DILG will issue an advisory on the voluntary use of face masks outdoors. Is the order good enough for you? Is there something in the advisory that you're actually eager or that you feel is necessary to clarify?
Well, sir, I think it's a good starting point. It describes the general guideline and the directive and the new policy shift of the national government, and allows a little bit of room for customization in case there's needed tweaking by the local government. Tingin ko po, maganda naman po yung pagkagawa.
And sana naman po talaga, no? But nonetheless, in your experience, what are the details where there might be room for confusion or at the very least different interpretations?
Well, ang nakalagay naman yata sa EO is that the DOH and the IATF may come up with details and further develops the policy. So ang nakalagay yata dito ay outdoor mandatory wearing of face mask, but it also provides for possible advancements for indoor in the future. As yun po napansin ko dito sa EO number 3.
Sir, we suppose kasi that, well, at least the broad strokes are there in the EO. Kailangan well-ventilated, kailangan non-crowded, at kailangan open. But in the end, it will fall back to the LGUs to implement and I suppose also to define exactly what is meant by, for example, non-crowded or open or well-ventilated. It boils down to nitty-gritty. It's baka yun ang pagtalunan eh.
Opo, tama kayo. Yan ang nakikita nating magiging point of detailing the operationalization of this EO. And I'm hoping and expecting that with the help of DOH and their technical experts, we will allow science to determine kung ano nga ba yung crowding, di ba? At ano ba yung safe na outdoors, well-ventilated, na distance na pwedeng walang mask, di ba? So, yun po, siguro kami sa mga LGUs, we will, of course, align with national guidelines, no? Kung ano nga ba yung safe. Doon tayo, yun ang i-implement namin.
Okay naman sa inyo yung Governor na i-ease na yan kasi kanina merong initial report na yung Davao City daw hindi yata susunod pero clarify na nila na susunod na sila ngayon dun sa EO3. Sa case po ng probinsya ninyo, okay naman yun? You think meron na kayong naka-develop na kayong well more or less some kind of wall of immunity to allow yung optional masking outdoors?
Yes, ma'am. I think po na it's well, noon pa lang po kasing nag-innovate ang province of Cebu. Pinag-aralan na rin po namin. Talagang tinignan na rin namin kasi we were thinking that might be the direction din talaga. And it's a matter of time when we need to shift. So, nakita naman natin so far with the experience of Cebu that even when they shifted their policy ay hindi mo naman mapapansin yung malaking uptick ng cases and makikita natin manageable pa rin naman yung hospitalization or yung use of hospital facilities. So, nandun naman siguro ang kailangan nating bantayan, can our healthcare system absorb kung sakaling may mga kaso, di ba? So, yun po ang isang parameter.
Ito po yung sentimiento ng members ng league ninyo, mga provincial governors. This is a common sentiment.
Well, in informal settings, when we have discussed this, I must admit, hindi pa naman ito naging agenda ng isang full assembly namin. We will have an assembly in a couple of weeks at malamang mapag-uusapan to in length, yung details nito. But marami naman nag-express ng willingness na talaga na mag-loosen ng health protocols. Especially doon sa outdoor areas nga. Dito kasi sa mga kaprobinsyahan, di po tulad ng Manila, may marami kaming open spaces na talagang kakaunti ang mga tao at hindi nagsisiksikan. Ano? So talagang it makes sense. And it's really very, very hard to implement. Ang hirap po talagang, kunyari yung coastline mo, lahat yun, beach, outdoor, lahat yun. Hindi naman mababantayan lahat yun ng ating mga barangay officials o ng ating mga kapulisan. So talagang it's impractical, di ba? But yun nga, pagka merong mga gatherings na kailangang bantayan, nandiyan naman yung mga enforcers ng mga LGUs. So yun naman ang binabantayan natin.
Meron po bang mechanism na kapag tumaas ay pwede nyo agad isuspend or hintayin nyo yung IATF na gumawa ng ganong change in policy or adjustment? Paano ho ba kaya ang paraan yan? For quick react, kumbaga.
Yeah, that's a very good question, ma'am. And I would also imagine, just as you were asking, na sana nga pagka mayroong metrics or indicators na madi-discover in a community or in a locality na medyo tumataas, tapos napupuno ang ospital, whether it's because of COVID or baka dengue yan or whatever. Basta the fact na merong mga kailangan ng more hospital beds na napupuno siya, baka dapat merong mechanism na i-allow ang IATF para may konting paghihigpit muna para lang bumaba yung mga kaso at ma-absorb nga ng healthcare system natin.
Okay.
Pero may local autonomy naman kayo dyan, I'm sure, sir, di ba? Kasi kung antayin nyo pa yung IATF, have you been given a measure of autonomy at least to decide whether or not you can actually suspend it?
Hindi pa po kami aware of the mechanism if there's any authority for the suspension and what are the process to be undertaken for that suspension, whether they will require IATF to be the one to suspend it or i-authorize ang local government council or yung governor or yung mayor to do it. So, but we will hopefully, kami sa ULAP and sa League of Provinces, we will reach out to DOH and IATF and we will openly discuss possibilities para napag-usapan nga po kung paano nga mangyayari kung sakali lang kinakailangan. But we're hoping na hindi mangyari yun eh. We're hoping na since gradual naman itong pag-ano natin,
yes.
baka hindi naman sana kailanganin. Pero just the same, tama kayo, let's be prepared. Tama po.
Okay, Governor Cua. Sir, maraming salamat po.
Thank you, sir.
The Quirino Governor Dax Cua is also chairperson of the League of Provinces of the Philippines. Now we'll shift gears over at the House of Representatives. A bill has been filed seeking the abolition of the Presidential Commission on Good Government, or the PCGG. Here's the author, Manila 6th District Representative Benny Abante. Congressman Abante, welcome to the Chiefs.
Magandang gabi po. Magandang gabi sa inyo. Salamat sa inyo.
Salamat din po at binisita nyo kami. Sir, maybe you'd like to take some time first to explain your proposal.
Well, the new president has been given a very big mandate of 31 million. That has not been given to any president, for that matter. So, ang ini-explain ko dito, is that, for example, like the PCCG was created by Executive Order Number 1, issued by President Corazon Aquino on February 28, 1986. And that is during the revolutionary government, no? Now, thereafter, President Aquino issued Proclamation Number 3, dated March 25, 1986, establishing a revolutionary government under which authority to issue sequestration and freeze orders was vested upon PCGG. However, Section 26, Article 18 of the 1987 Constitution provides that the authors to issue such sequestration or freeze orders under Proclamation Number 3 shall remain operative only for not more than 18 months after the ratification of the Constitution. Itong authority ito, naglapse na ito without having been extended by Congress, which the latter could have done under the same Section 26 in case of national interest. Well, of course, more so, ngayon nakita natin 36 years have passed. And the PCGG has not produced, I believe, significant accomplishment that would justify its continued existence. Meron pang tinatawag na corruption dyan sa loob. Alright? At karamihan ng kanilang mga mga cases against the Marcoses were even dismissed. So, sabi ko, I believe the PCGG has outlived its usefulness and has now become a big embarrassment to the government.
Well, sir, let me play the devil's advocate here. You began by setting the premise that the president has the biggest mandate of all so far, 31 million, and that's correct, naman. It is a huge mandate, the biggest mandate.
Yes.
But
Yes.
what does popularity have to do with recovery of ill-gotten wealth? That's one.
In one way or another, the people have spoken in a big, massive way, no? I mean, anong ibig sabihin ito? I mean, siguro sabihin natin na baka maiksi yung memory ng ating mga kababayan that another Marcos became president. So, meron niyang relationship doon sa usefulness actually ng PCGG. Palagay ko naman alam naman ng ating mga kababayan ang patungkol sa mga bagay na yan. No? And the only thing is that the PCGG was only created to sequester and to file charges on the ill-gotten wealth of one man. And that was President Marcos Sr.
Pero doon po to your second point, I leave muna the question of whether or not the people are in effect saying hindi na baling nanakawang kami. But to your point of usefulness, the PCGG has said they have recovered, in fact, 174 billion of assets, ill-gotten wealth by President Ferdinand Marcos Sr. and his wife and their cronies from 1986 to 2020. So there's no question that there was ill-gotten wealth na ninakaw, na-recover to. Why is that insignificant? 174 billion pesos.
Well, there is actually a question on that, no? And of course, the PCGG has recovered some, but they have not recovered all. And most of the charges they filed against the Marcoses actually were dismissed, you know? And I think that 36 years are more than enough for any agency like the PCGG to perform its function.
But let me take the counterfactual, sir. Ang tanong lang is, why is the question not, therefore, kung may natitira pang ma-recover na mga ninakaw na mga Marcos, kung hindi pa nakukuha, then why is the position, tigilan na lang natin kung hindi nakukuha, hindi po ba ang dapat isipin ng mga tao, kung hindi pa nakukuha, di habulin pa natin?
Palagay mo kaya ngayon sa ating administrasyon na ito, the PCGG was still able to perform the job objectively?
Well, I think that's precisely what people
That's the
are...
question then.
So,
So sa akin, yung kanilang kapangyarihan, the powers and functions of investigations and prosecution of criminal cases exercised by the PCGG should be transferred to the Department of Justice. Civil cases.
Actually, sir, ang suggestion pa nga ni Justice Secretary ay i-expand, no? At palawigin pa nga ang function ng PCGG to include other illegally gotten assets, no? So, but here you are, you're saying tanggalin na lang yan. When the Justice Secretary, no less, said, let's expand it. How do you reconcile your point?
That statement was only given after I filed the bill, no? Siguro kung yung statement na yan, sinabi nila na hindi lang ang Marcoses, pero lahat ng mga politiko, lahat ng mga public officials na merong ill-gotten wealth, ay talagang iimbestigahan ng PCGG. I would be amenable to let the PCCG continue. Pero wala pa namang statement na sinabing ganyan eh. Oo.
So linawin lang namin, Congressman, hindi niyo naman sinasuggest na tigilan na yung paghahabol ng, allegedly ill-gotten wealth ng mga Marcoses, kundi gusto niyo lang ipa-abolish yung PCGG.
Yes, totoo yun. But ito ang sabihin ko lang. No? Halimbawa, yung sinabing statement ni Secretary Remulla, no? Na i-expand pa ito. Ibig sabihin na expand yan, imbestigahan na lahat ang allegedly ill-gotten wealth ng lahat ng mga opisyal. Perhaps the PCGG could still do its work. Pero kung isang tao lang yan, kung isang tao lang ang kanilang imbestigahan dyan, sa palagay ko, sa administrasyon na ito, I do not know, Oo. Na anong maaaring mangyari. So ano gagawin natin? Kung isang tao lang imbestigahan, let it be transferred to the DOJ. The civil cases involving the management, administration, and disposition of all the assets, as well as sequestration of the properties considered to be ill-gotten, vested in the PCGG, can be transferred and be exercised by the Department's of Finance Office of the Department's Office of the Government Corporate Council. Meron tayo nun eh.
Congressman, nandun pa rin po ako doon sa isang sinasabi nyo that you're suggesting that, look, sayang lang ang pera, sayang lang ang budget sa PCGG kasi hindi rin naman nahahabol. But over the course from 1986, as we said, to 2020, the PCGG on average has been contributing 500 to 600 million pesos to the national coffers. In 2021, their budget was only less than 150 million. How is that lugi? How do you say that is lugi? 150 million yung budget, 500 million yung pinasok sa kaban.
Nandun na tayo, Ed, no? Pero alam mo, when you begin to have an agency that's only investigating one person, and that's been there for 36 years. Nung panahon ni Aquino, hindi nga nila inakali aabot ng 36 years yan. Nung panahon nga ni Aquino, ratify a constitution 18 months lang ang binigay para ang PCCG nandyan. Afterwards, hindi na yan na in-extend pa ng Kongreso. Alright? Ngayon, it's now 36 years. Now 36 years. Still, they're investigating one person. Kaya sa akin ito, siguro i-withdraw ko yung bill na yan. Kapag halimbawa, in-expand talaga yan at sabihin natin lahat ng ill-gotten wealth ng lahat ng public officials, kunin. It's a question. File charges against everyone. Why would you only file charges to one person na ngayon ang anak ang presidente?
Pero sir, isn't that the job of the ombudsman to file charges against everybody else? Versus, for example, the PCGG, which is going against, or was going against a family that has been found to have amassed, and we have recovered,
3 billion
137, 140 billion pesos. $680 million, among other things.
It's an overlapping responsibilities. My goodness, bakit anong ginagawa ng ibang ahensya ng gobyerno? For example, like kinakailangan pa yung PCGG, kung halimbawa, the Department of Justice can do something about that. The Department Office of the Government Corporate Council, and then we have the Privatization Office of the Department of Finance. I mean, let them do the work.
Yeah, what about the argument, sir, that we have not seen plunderers on the scale and level of Marcos Sr. and his cronies, I mean, in our history.
Nor have we made recoveries at that level.
Recoveries. And the experience of our government, of PCGG precisely, has been, they were in power for so long that going after it has been so convoluted, so hard. We have been hard pressed to recover everything precisely because they have buried this under so many papers, so many documents, the highest paid lawyers, and so on. And that is precisely the argument why the Marcoses are in a special league of corruption, and therefore it deserves its special, it's a special dedicated system just to go after what they had plundered.
You mean to tell me that there ought to be a special dedicated system just to be able to investigate and get the illegal of one person? My goodness, how about the other plunderers? Why can't the PCCG investigate on them? Why only one man? For 36 years, just one man. And you tell me now that because now we have a new administration that is now being led by the son of an alleged plunderer, having ill-gotten wealth. Do you think that the PCCG can be very objective on that?
But that's precisely where it does beg the question. I agree with you. But if is the argument, therefore, are you in effect saying that, tanggalin na lang natin dahil walang pag-asa na si Marcos Jr. will go after yung ninakaw ni Marcos Sr. If that is essentially the categorical statement, I agree with you. But is that what you're saying? Na hindi hahabulin ng Pangulong to dahil ang nagnakaw ay tatay at nanay niya?
Well, to me, sabi ko nga kanina, if the PCGG will not only focus their investigation to one man, but they will focus the investigation to all supposedly plunderers of ill-gotten wealth. I would agree with that. Let the PCCG stay. All right? But if they will still focus their investigation to one man, meron tayong ibang ahensya ng gobyerno that can take care of that.
Kailangan bang legislation para baguhin ang mandato ng PCGG?
I don't think there is any other legislation because sabi ko nga sa aking bill the powers and functions of investigations and prosecution, number one, of criminal cases exercised by the PCGG can be transferred to the Department of Justice. Civil cases can be transferred to the Department Office of the Government Corporate Council. All other sequestered real and personal assets and properties can be transferred to the Privatization Office of the Department of Finance. Let them do the work.
Pero DOJ na nag-handle ng mga prosecution ng wealth cases, di ba?
Actually, Ami, bakit ba kinait ang PCGG? Hindi ba kinait ang PCGG only for the Marcoses?
Oo nga.
Oh, yun. Di ba? I mean, look, we now have a new president. So sabihin natin, okay, PCGG, bakit kinakailangan pa magkaroon yan? Ngayon, sasabihin ko nga, if we still want the PCGG, then I would say, let the PCGG investigate all cases of plunder, all cases of ill-gotten wealth by all public officials in government.
Okay.
Okay sa akin yun.
Okay, sir. Well, we understand your point. Maraming salamat po, Congressman Benny Abante ng 6th District ng Maynila. Maraming salamat
Thank
po.
you,
joining us
thank you
tonight.
very much.
Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, sir.
Salamat
Ingat
po.
po.
Thank you pa.
We are starting up another conversation right after this break, so please stay with us.
The government is asking the International Criminal Court to let the Philippine justice system take its course on drug war cases.
The best way to handle the matter is really for the ICC prosecutor to allow the Philippine domestic proceedings to continue. Leave us alone for now. Gagawin muna namin yung dapat natin gawin.
Guevara added that not all drug war casualties were, quote, nanlaban cases.
For all we know, baka karamihan dyan talaga naman ay dahil called for by the situation. Dahil baka nalagay din sa danger ang buhay ng ating mga police officers. So nandun din yung possibility na yun eh. Kaya yun ang investigahan.
In probing the drug war, the government's lawyer tells the International Criminal Court to back off for now. Let's get the insights of our guest who joins us via Zoom, CHR Executive Director Jacqueline De Guia. Ma'am, maraming salamat for joining us tonight and welcome to the Chiefs.
Again, our pleasure to join you. Good evening, Luchi. Good evening, Roby, and as well as Amy. Again, a pleasure to be in your show.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, of course, we do want to talk about, among other things as well, the budget of CHR. But let me start off with the ICC. Ang sinabi ng Solgen, in their comments, sabi nila, number one, the ICC has no jurisdiction. We've heard that before. Also, that no crimes against humanity had been committed, and that state-level proceedings or investigations should take precedence under the complementarity principle. Comments first, ma'am, from the side of the CHR to these comments.
Well, of course, it has always been a stand of the CHR that the government must take serious steps in order to investigate these cases. And if the OSG is saying now that the Philippine government is ready to take a more proactive role in terms of investigating these cases, strengthening the review panel, not only merely to investigate, but merely also to move to the next level of prosecuting these cases, such will be a welcome development, because that, after all, is the overall goal in this ICC probe.
Yes, ma'am. But that might be a bit subjective in determining whether or not sufficient yung review panel and investigations. So it boils down to that din. From what we understand, the Soldier and the DOJ, they're saying na the processes are moving and that's sufficient.
Well, the ICC asked them to comment precisely because they found such actions wanting in the past. And there is more burden now in the government to show that they are more serious. And that's what the ICC is looking for now. More Kian de los Santos cases, more cases reaching the courts, not merely at the review level. And we do hope that the government will take this feedback constructively and work on on demonstrating that indeed our local mechanisms are working. Kasi nga, they found it wanting in the past.
Yes, but,
What about the CHR? You have people on the ground. We have a new administration, yan ang tanong ngayon eh. Nire-reset niyo ba yung clock niyo, no capability, the willingness and ability of the government to investigate? Ano yung nakikita niyo under the new administration? You think the ability and willingness are there?
You know, SOJ Remulla has uttered some statements wherein he did say that he wants victims to come forward and he will offer support to them. Those are confidence-building measures that needs to be followed through, no? And a strong partnership with CHR will bolster such statements. And the OSG also mentioned that they're more open to working with CHR, and that will follow through because crimes, because they are state perpetrated. Naturally, there's a climate of fear. Naturally, victims and witnesses are afraid to come forward. But if there are more encouraging statements coming from government, from DOJ, from OSG, and then they partner with CHR, then there are more chances that this climate of fear will be countered and there will be more trust on the side of the victims and the witnesses so that cases can move forward.
Attorney De Guia,
Both Secretary Remulla and OSG Guevara have pointed out the difficulty of gathering evidence to proceed with all these cases, no? Do you agree, considering what you're saying? Napakahirap daw kumuha ng ebidensya, napakahirap kumuha ng testimony, which is why Boying Remulla issued that call to the police to come out and testify for protection daw sila. Do you agree under our system na medyo mahirap nga siya?
It was, and it was reflected in our report. The fact that there was prohibition for the PNP, for example, to cooperate with the CHR is one concrete example of the difficulty that we encountered in investigating these cases. And if you look at the nature of the crimes, because it is allegedly state perpetrated, allegedly done by the police, of course, there is a national fear coming from the victims and the witnesses that the power that they have, that the authority that they have may be used against them. And that is the reason why more confidence-building measures need to be instituted by the government, by DOJ, for example. They need to utter more statements. They need to strengthen their witness assistance program, make it available to EJK victims and witnesses, partner with the CHR because some victims and witnesses have voiced out that they have high trust level with CHR. So that those kind of initiatives will, in the long run, contribute to countering the climate of fear that we now have.
Yeah, but Attorney De Guia, to your point, as you acknowledge these confidence-building statements, if not measures, doesn't that at the very least buy this still relatively new government some level of good faith and, for that matter, some level of time to prove their sincerity and capacity to the International Criminal Court? Does that not give them standing to say that, look, we understand where you're coming from, but we're new. But even the CHR is acknowledging that we have been issuing these confidence-building statements, if not taking some confidence-building actions.
You know, Robbie, that's quite accurate, no? Because if we try to look at the statements of the new government, they are not totally closing their doors in the ICC probe. The mere fact that they are engaging in the process is itself indicative that there is hope about this new administration. And the fact that they did say that they're going to engage even out of committee is a welcome development than having no engagement at all from the government. And we do hope that in the long run, they will pursue accountability. They will be sincere in strengthening the DOJ review panel. They will make sure that the NBI now moves past forward investigation and that these cases reaches the NPS so that appropriate charges can be filed, and there is no more unilateral assertion of non-laban, and it is the courts that will decide with finality, based on the evidence that will be brought before them, whether or not indeed there were alleged cases of EJK.
Attorney De Guia, other than these encouraging words, as you put it, how are you feeling if any indicators of, as you put it, sincerity at your level? Nabanggit nyo nga na before, meron talagang outright sinabi, not just don't cooperate, even contempt for the CHR. That was on the previous administration. Now you have the Justice Secretary encouraging the police to come out, witnesses to come out, and so on. But how are you feeling it and how are you seeing it at your level?
Robbie, we're cautiously optimistic. We also have the UNJP program, as a result of the Human Rights Council resolution, and that is at its best moving forward also. We like to give it some chance, we like to give it some opportunity, because the way we see it, panalo pa rin yung victims kapag nagkaroon ng accountability at the domestic level. And I think that it's too early also for us to pass judgment in this new administration. We're also keenly waiting on the developments that will unfold this coming months and weeks. We are due for the Universal Periodic Review. The Philippine government will comment on our compliance with regards to our treaty obligations on human rights. We're also due to report on the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and that is where the usapin about EJK will be most relevant. And then we also have the Human Rights Council opening soon, and as we understand, the Philippine government will be actively participating in the UN General Assembly. And so we anticipate that there will be some statements made about the government's stand on human rights. And we are hopeful, as the President has mentioned, that he will stay committed with human rights. We hope that that will follow through in his statements in the coming weeks, and that it will be also bolstered by concrete actions later on by the different line executive agencies as they work with us and the UN in the joint program.
What about our being part of the IPCC? Do you see any hope for this administration to turn around what seems to be its decision to really put an end to our participation in the Rome Statute? How much of a bearing will that have on the fight against human rights and the fight for all of these cases to actually result in convictions if we don't rejoin ICC?
Luchi, we're really hopeful that the government will revisit its position, because that position actually can be revisited. And as I was saying in some of my previous interviews, probably the perspective that we have to have in this issue is to look at the macro perspective and not limit it to the current administration and not look at themselves. Because if we were to look at the global context, we have the Ukraine crisis still unfolding as we speak right now. And just recently, we were able to avoid the China-Taiwan conflict. And in this kind of situations, the ICC remains to be a helpful mechanism when domestic remedies are no longer able to work. Say, for example, in times of war or in times of armed aggression, we do look for an additional mechanism that our future generations can have recourse to. And if you look at it from that perspective, it doesn't become personal, it doesn't become that threatening. Because sometimes when governments apply it in the current context, then there's apprehension, there's anxiety that they might become the accused in all of these proceedings. But if we try to look past it, if we try to look at it from a global context, from a bigger perspective, and with the objective of protecting future generations, we do now see that it actually has a function. It does not really interfere with our internal sovereignty. It does not serve to supplant our local mechanisms such as courts, but it adds as an additional access to remedy in cases where there is extreme danger, say, for example, in the case of a war.
Do you think that's going to happen within the next 6 years? Do you
so,
see?
China, Taiwan, it was so close to home. It probably also managed to shake us, our perspectives. So probably, as time passes by and they see this international conflicts, probably they will revisit their position and see that it's nothing personal. It's nothing confined only to the Philippine experience, for example.
Pero ang sinasabi nga ng administration, we have the capability naman daw to try crimes against humanity, even those related to war.
But we have to look at
history, yung well, they're citing, of course, ibang ano yan, the Americans were here at that time, yung panahon ni General Yamashita, no? So that's a different period naman. Pero yun ang sinasabi nila, that we have the capability, we have the president to try those cases.
Yeah. I mean, it's perfectly understandable for any government naman, for any state really to assert that it has a functioning democracy, it has a functioning justice system, no? And we take pride in that. And we're not saying that our courts are useless, our justice system is no longer functioning. But we have to contemplate that there are particular situations where our domestic mechanisms may be compromised. And again, I invite everyone to look at the Ukraine crisis. In times of war, in times of heavy bombings, for example, we cannot rely on our local courts, we cannot rely on our own people to continue their job. And it is at these times that we look for additional mechanisms when domestic remedies are no longer available. Or say, for example, there are some factors within a particular country that would hinder an effective investigation or a genuine investigation. And if we look past through the current situation, I think people will see value in it. And that is the reason why we have to think outside the box, think beyond the drug war, to see again the value of the ICC.
Ma'am, let's talk about budgets. The proposed 2023 budget under the NEP for CHR is a little over 800 million. That's 120 million more or less shy of your budget for this year, and around half of your proposed budget for next year, which I think is around 1.6 billion. How does that affect your operations?
No, Ed, we were hoping that our proposal for 1.6 billion will be endorsed by the Department of Budget Management, because we want to be more relevant. We want to make sure that we are able to act on more cases. And the slash, for example, in the proposed budget of the DBM in terms of our MOE will greatly hamper the services being given by our regional offices. Everyone knows that we only have 16 regional offices. We don't have offices at the municipal as well as city level. And it is very crucial, therefore, for our 16 regional offices to reach far-flung areas and to maintain our accessibility communications-wise. And therefore, the slash of 118 million in our MOE will greatly hamper our services. That is not to mention, of course, that we are proposing another 800 million for new and expanding projects. And these new and expanding projects, for example, range from the establishment of the Human Rights Institute, which will deepen the understanding of the public about human rights, popularizing our findings about the climate change report. Again, a landmark initiative done by the CHR. Climate change is very relevant right now. We want to make sure that government is able to act on our recommendations as well as other stakeholders. And then, of course, we want to make sure that we are able to continue our financial assistance program to victims of human rights violations. Not to mention, of course, that we also want to make sure that we are able to upgrade our vehicles, because while we are thankful for the previous administration in providing us many vehicles which increased our accessibility to far-flung areas, most of these vehicles have already aged. And we want to make sure that they are upgraded together with the equipment of our staff.
At Attorney De Guia, kamusta ka rin po yung chairmanship or chairpersonship sa CHR hanggang ngayon, naka-OIC pa rin po. I understand by December, the President should appoint a new chairperson. May balita po ba tayo doon?
Robbie, there has been none yet. We are also keenly waiting for news. We do hope that the Marcos administration will be appointing soon a new set of commissioners and chairperson. We do hope that the process will be open, transparent, inclusive, and consultative. And more importantly, we do hope that the characteristics laid out by the Paris Principles will also be carried out. We do hope that they will come from diverse backgrounds so that they will demonstrate pluralism. We do hope that they have a strong background in human rights, at least 10 years experience, so to speak, said by the Subcommittee on Accreditation. And then we do also hope that they will be independent and they will be fierce advocates on human rights.
But falling short of that long list of standards that you hope for, what's at stake for the CHR and human rights in the Philippines?
Robbie, a lot is at stake, no? This year, we're supposed to be accredited again as a Status A National Human Rights Institute. And the Philippine government, as well as the Philippine public, should draw pride that for the past 35 years, the CHR has always been a Status A accredited institution. And that reflects well in terms of the commitment of the government towards human rights protection and promotion. And therefore, if we're not able to maintain that standing and we're downgraded, it reflects badly on the government as well as on the state of human rights here in the government. We always want a strengthened CHR. That's a commitment also under the UNGP. And it will send a strong message, basically, Robbie, if we were able to appoint a strong commission that there is really support for the protection and promotion of human rights in the country.
Well, by way of strengthening the CHR, are you hoping for any particular piece of legislation or executive action? We have a new administration, we have a new Congress.
You know, Ami, we've been fighting for our own charter. We do hope that the Marcos administration will be supportive of strengthening the CHR. And then the government is a signatory of the optional protocol on the Convention Against Torture. And one of the deliverables there is to create an agency, a national preventive mechanism that will carry out visits in detention facilities. But the beauty about this system is that it is non-adversarial. And it is really actually collaborative and engaging with the government or with our detention custodian facilities. And so we hope that these pieces of legislation will be passed alongside other pieces of legislation contained in our legislative agenda. Of course, we'd like the Human Rights Defenders Bill to be passed, the IDP Bill, the Anti-Discrimination Bill. It will mean a lot for our LGBTQI community. The Comprehensive Anti-Discrimination Bill. We're also batting for the government to push for the Convention on Older Persons. We do have an aging population right now, and we'd like to counter ageism. And then, of course, we'd like to see continued support for legislation that caters to women, to children, to OFWs, to persons deprived of liberty, and all the members of our vulnerable sector.
Okay, Attorney Jacqueline De Guia, Executive Director of the Commission on Human Rights. Ma'am, maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much. Mabuhay kayong lahat.
Thank you, Attorney.
And that's it for the Chiefs. We hope what was discussed will keep the conversation going. Ako po si Roby Alampay.
I'm Mami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Luchi Cruz-Valdes of News 5.
I'm Lingao. We are One News, all sides, all the time.